Good evening and welcome to Connecting the Dots episode 3. Episode 1 and 2 can be found on our YouTube page, dwellrealestate.tv. I'll drop that link in the comments, dwellrealestate.tv. I'm Anthony Delicandro, Dwell Real Estate here in Linwood, and it is a nice Monday evening. Happy Veterans Day, and thank you for those that have served our great country all these years. So Connecting the Dots is just a show where I like to connect certain aspects of real estate, housing trends, and things that are impacting our market, usually in a relatively close time frame. In this case, I was reminded, thanks to Facebook Memories, of an article that I shared back in 2012 from the Wall Street Journal. And it just reminded me of just where we were as a region and how we were in comparison to the rest of the country, as the country was experiencing a rather challenging crisis that was taking place, led primarily by the impact of the default segment of the real estate business, bank foreclosures, its impact on housing and pricing, et cetera. So I'm going to share my screen and go back to 2012 here. Here is the article that I pulled up, and it's interesting because I spoke to Nick Timmerhouse of the Wall Street Journal a couple of times in 2012. Around this particular period in November, I spoke to him just after Sandy as well, and we talked a little bit about Sandy's impact on the real estate market. But in this article, Nick is talking about why the foreclosure discount is actually helping home prices. And what's interesting, what it reminded me of was that I realized as time went by, we were not going to see the impact of foreclosure and pricing on foreclosures. We weren't going to have that big of an impact on our overall median sales price for quite some time because we really didn't see the volume that some of the other parts of the country state. And so what was happening here back at the end of 2012 is the discount between foreclosed properties and normal sales shrank back in the end of 2012 because they were starting to see fewer and fewer foreclosures coming onto the market because in some of the West Coast states, and as we scroll down, we can see in California and in some of the other big, metropolitan areas, Miami, Los Angeles, but primarily the states like Arizona, Nevada, we saw the discount between bank-owned sales and normal sales start to shrink. And in some of the East Coast states where we have a judicial process, and for those that don't understand the difference between how foreclosures are processed in essentially the West Coast and the East Coast, but more so between judicial states and non-judicial states, I welcome any type of communication. Send me a message, give me a call. I'm happy to sit down and share some of our experiences with the differences there. But we noticed back again in 2012, the discounts remained were far greater in the states that still had high inventories of foreclosures, like New Jersey, New York, Maryland, etc. So as we continue to see our foreclosure inventory mounts, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to the report that I recently completed on the third quarter. And as we scroll to the bottom of this report, if you've looked at it in the past, you'll notice or you'll remember that I included a bank-owned impact, right? And so what we have here is we've got the differences between median sales price of non-distressed properties and median sales price of bank-owned here going back all the way to 2010. And so you'll notice the differences are quite large. And you'll notice back in 2016, that's when the bank foreclosures actually really kind of hit the floor, right, at the lowest rate. And then since then, we've seen some big upticks in the number of transactions that are selling year over year. In fact, I'll scroll back to the top here and we'll see that, right, as we look at the number of sales since 2014, 15, 16, right? In 16, they were up 13% for the third quarter rather. In 2017, number of sales were up 11%. So we had some big gains in overall activity and demand. And so ultimately what happened is we're seeing the overall median sales price of bank-owned properties increase greatly. There's still a high volume of them, and we're still going to have a lot of a high volume of foreclosures as we move through the balance of 2018 and into 2019 as well. But eventually we're going to start to see a shift. And these numbers that are in currently, the 18, 17, 19% of all sales, right? Almost 1 in 5 homes being sold right now is bank foreclosure. As we move past 2019, that number is going to start to dramatically decrease. And we're also going to see the numbers of sales, the sales prices of those bank-owned properties start to appreciate. And that's where we're going to start to realize some even bigger gains in overall median sales price. Because instead of 1 out of 5, and this goes back to my conversation with Nick back in 2012, there were a lot of homeowners that simply walked away, like literally walked away from their homes immediately post Sandy. And those are a lot of the properties that we're selling today. So what we saw was a difference of where we're seeing a difference in a discount went from, like right here in 2016, almost 70% or just about 70% less was median sales price of bank-owned properties than median sales properties. Today, 2 years later, it's less than 50%. So that disparity between bank-owned properties and non-distressed has closed greatly. It's going to do nothing but continue to close. So if you held out waiting for a fantastic deal of a lifetime of a bank-owned property, you may have waited a little bit too long. Doesn't mean that there's still not great opportunities in the market. We also have interest rates that are rising, which is another reason why getting into the market as a buyer sooner rather than later is going to be a better opportunity for most. But, check that out. Again, thank you for joining me. Connecting the Dots, episode 3. The other episodes can be found on our YouTube page, which I'm going to show you here. dwellrealestate.tv is our YouTube page, and there are several playlists. Included in these playlists is our Connecting the Dots series, where you can get lots of in-depth information on just what's happening here in the market, together with, of course, our other market reports and other in-depth articles that we like to share. So hopefully this is fun for you. Thank you very much for joining me. Any questions, of course, reach out. We like to be your source for answers and solutions and not just keys to the front door. So hopefully all's well. Have a great evening. Thank you so much. See you soon.